From your perspective and role, what does mission mean when you put it alongside the words older people? Would you like to launch us on in that?
Certainly. For me, mission with older people and the connotation of my role is about supporting the most vulnerable people in Scotland where ageing and the negative connotations of ageing have created a very vulnerable situation for an individual where security is an absolute desire from the family's perspective as well as the individual themselves. So the mission for me would be about supporting the most vulnerable people at any point in their life and in their journey. As people get older and as some of the more common diseases and ailments that we know about affect them, that feeling of a person and being a person can often be stripped back, and we lose an awful lot of who that person is very quickly because we like to stick labels on. So if we see a person who has dementia, the person sometimes stops being Alan or Neil or Maureen. We see a person with dementia, and then we're desperately keen to find out where their progress is in that disease. So I'm not now Alan, I'm now Alan with a moderate degree of dementia. And then I'm now Alan with a moderate degree of dementia, and there will be now a number of judgments placed against me. And that will be that you're all bound to have failing memory, you're probably going to have difficulty with some communication, and your memory impairment is such that your problem solving ability is going to be affected. We don't do that if I'm Alan and I have a broken leg. We say, this will take several weeks to heal and plaster, and then you will be who you are. But we rush around making judgments because of labels with older people, which really detracts from their ability to be a person and be a person who's continuing to try and fulfill their potential. And for me, the mission in older people is about a witness for me as a Christian to be able to try and help that person to remain the person who they are and to continue that journey of life that they're on, and to try and help them to achieve some of these goals that they've set themselves that they may feel they will never achieve. So really that's, I think, what mission is for older people is. It's about trying to retain the person, trying to retain and applaud and commend and recognise the experience. How often we have examples in Crossreach of our interactions with schools, and schools who are now recognising the experience and wisdom of older person, whether they have dementia or not, and are contacting Crossreach to ask, would you engage with our history programme? So when we're now talking about the world wars, or we're now talking about different aspects of history, such as, it could be anything, Scottish culture, they are now asking questions, would any of the residents in the care home mind coming to school and being part of this programme? And we've got some examples of that now, where I think our mission is absolutely about helping younger people in society, and people who, the adult group, who never seem to actually have any kind of age definition attached to them, to try and help to see that person can still contribute to the education of our young people and to help young people fulfil their potential. So I think our mission from my perspective is to help the person to continue to realise the potential, to help society and to help community to recognise the contribution that person can still make, and to break down the barriers within society about discrimination and our desire as a group of human beings within society to love to label something and give something a name.
Okay, thank you. Let's pass it on to Neil there. Mission, older people. What does that mean to you?
A couple of things, Colin. There is our organisational mission, which is promoted in all of our services through all of what we do, and that's then transferred to the direct care that our staff provide, and that's the organisational mission. From my point of view, just if I could backtrack just a little bit in terms of my own personal mission, I began working for Crossreach 20 years ago. My mission then has remained the same. I wanted to make a difference to people that I cared for. Predominantly, my career has involved caring for people who are older, not older people, people who are older. And I've never lost that mission. I think what you have to really think about is understand what the word means. I feel like I'm a modern person. I always think there should be impossible after that word. And what I hope from today is that we don't put the word impossible after that. Mission is something to be achieved. It's a task set out and for people to come together and to achieve a set goal. From my own role within William Wood, I believe that the staff come together to achieve that mission.
Tom, I suspect on the church mission and older people might work out slightly differently from what we've heard in Crossreach.
Well, yes, as a parish ministry here, ours is very much a residential area, and I would suspect very well placed to support the folks in that. Our mission, of course, is the same as every other parish church, that to take Christ into the parish and to take Christ beyond the parish. And that means, for us, being good neighbours to the folks round about us. Now, mission, and if we're talking about mission to older people, lots of older people do mission in the terms of being good neighbours, bringing Christ in practical ways to their neighbours. I'm very much aware, and the report for the General Assembly had this really well documented, that society's changes mean that nowadays many of the people in my parish and others are living on their own with family, perhaps working in Berlin or Australia or New Zealand, etc. They're well dispersed, and even if they've got a family, they're on their own and they're dependent on friends and neighbours, and the church is really well placed to support them there. Folks also who have no family at all find the church as a family, and so if it's dementia or memory loss or other frailty that prevents them living full lives, then there's a burden upon the church and a mission, a specific mission and a growing mission to support these folks in relationship with the care agencies and, of course, the social services. So it's a growing area for us, but it's an area which is part of our life. It's not something separate. Mission for us is just being Christ's agents to our neighbours and enabling them to live in as good, you said, connections and communications are so vital. We've got a whole raft of things we can perhaps come to as parish churches we do to engage and support and fulfil that mission. But if I can say again, it's a growing area. We've discussed this often together as to what we might do in the community for people who are more and more isolated, whether they've got families or not.
Okay. Maureen.
Thank you very much. I mean, the emphasis of faith in older people is around the importance of the spiritual dimension, whether, as I said, whether that's a faith or not. And I think this is about enabling people to build a resilience to the things that come to them, whether it's through bereavement or whether it's through loss of health or loss of independence in different ways from work. And a couple of things struck me from the report was the importance of building confidence. And I think we've learned quite a lot today about being confident to support people who maybe have conditions that we don't quite know what to do with. And a lot of the work that Faith in Older People does is with pastoral carers in their own home about understanding dementia, looking at practical tools, looking at practical issues that can come together. But with care home staff who perhaps don't come from a faith background or really acknowledge spiritual values, it's helping them to see how important that is. So there's a learning that I think runs through all the inputs we've had already today that's really important. So confidence and learning. But our main thing is about supporting the values that people have held throughout their lives so that they don't get lost because they suddenly become the person who is being cared for in room 28 on corridor 1. That's really what we don't want. We also want to ensure that there's a confidence in congregations so that those who care, those who've been bereaved, are still welcomed. I'm astonished sometimes that we aren't as good at this as we ought to be. And a lot of the work done around good life, good death, good grief highlights that we are very shy of this. We don't like these conversations, whether it's end of life, whether it's illness, and we do need to have the confidence and the support from each other in order to tackle these issues.
Ian.
I think I can't disagree with anything that people have said so far. And one of the things that I've been trying to say as we talk about this within our own organisation is that we have to see older people as a group with whom we work, rather than people to and for whom we do things. I think Sandra said earlier, the quote from Harriet Mount, that we are older people, that they are us. And I think that's absolutely crucial. And if we keep that in mind, we start to see how we can actually use the skills, attributes and experiences of older people who are sometimes in need of care, and to a degree maybe in need of care, but still have a lot to bring and a lot to offer to the church. Professor Swinton of University of Aberdeen said during our research project, Golden Age project, that what we had to think about was how people can be regarded still as having so much to offer. I was talking to a group the other night, maybe about 40 odd people in Stonehaven it was. And if we take the figures that we heard earlier on from Tom, that the average age of church people is 62. In this group it would be more than that. But there's something like 2,500 years of experience in that room. And I want to ask the question, what use are we as a church making of that? How can we bring to bear that whole experience, the skills, the background, the wisdom that's included in that? That's a huge resource. And these are well-able people who are desperate to make use of that. And I want to say more about that in answer to some of the other questions. Mission can be done to older people. You can reach out to older people, and I think there are issues about that, because we have a society in which the number of people coming to church has gone down, yet the demographic within that church has actually got bigger. So it's almost a double whammy. So the kind of people coming to church, there's more and more of them around, but they're not coming, they're not involved. How can we give them a place that says, not only can you get something from being part of this organisation and this whole way of life, but also you can give something to it. And I think that's absolutely crucial to what we do, but also to what older people can do for us and with us. So mission, yes, mission is about reaching out, but it's also about using older people to do that reaching out. And another thing that John Swinton had said to us was about older people are now the last vestige, in a sense, of people who can pass on the Christian story. You know, and I use the example of a colleague in 121 who said they'd been in a quiz, and one of the questions was, how many disciples does Jesus have? And he said, everyone looked at him and said, you work for the church, you must know the answer. He said, so I had a stab at it and said 12. And that turned out to be the right answer. And that kind of epitomizes where a lot of generations are now, because they're not receiving that Christian story, and not just the facts and the numbers behind that story, but what Christian faith means, what it can offer to them, what they can offer to the church, and so on. So there are many ways in which we can build on and use the experience of older people, which we haven't defined deliberately, I think, today. But how can we make use of all of that background and turn it to a strength, and not just see older people as someone we have to do something for and to?
Sandra.
Thank you. As a local church, we're interested in the well-being of everybody in the community. So that's our members, but also all the other people in our local community. The term parish is not helpful. It's sort of it's churchy language. So we've been using words like community more. And so this sort of move to include everybody at whatever level they would like has become part of our way of working. We're particularly, I think, acknowledging that there are people, we have to acknowledge that we're dealing with isolation and loneliness, but we equally have to acknowledge that there are opportunities for people if we can just get the access right as part of our whole style, if you like. to go back to our wise women, this series of festivals, they were conceived as mission tools. They covered different subjects. Currently, we're doing sacred music. We've done science, reason, and religion. But Aging and Faith started off as a celebration. But it quickly moved into something that was a little deeper, if you like. But our wise women captured a phrase that we stole from Faith in Older People, from FEOP, and that was keeping the spirit alive. And that almost became their mantra, we can run with this one. But they did say things like, other people should recognize that old age is the hardest part of our spiritual journey. It's not but our understanding of faith, our exploration of faith, it's not something that stops as you get old. And other people have to acknowledge that and work with that with us. So there was a fairly positive message coming out, clear, that, don't put us in a corner, we want to hear it as it is. So our mission in that sense involved building on what was already in place. There are lots of things, lots of activities that were around, so we were building on them, looking at the individual groups in the church, but also in the community. We were not wanting to duplicate. We wanted to sort of be part of a whole, part of everything that was being done in the community. And that involves getting engaged in agencies that perhaps we've just joined the Edinburgh Interfaith Association. I don't think that many churches are part of that. But we feel that's the right direction for us to take as the church within the whole community. We worked on the different elements the Wisdom Group had identified about socializing, about being creative, and we had a series of activities that fed into the Golden Age project. We were one of the churches that participated in the Golden Age project. Now there I'm stuck. Thank you, friend. And we looked at how we could engage the whole congregation and the wider community, our neighbouring churches as well, in looking at this whole business of ageing. So we had a session conference which dealt with, it was called Winding Down and Revving Up, which was a quote from an old lady who said that was what old age was about. It was about winding down, but I'm not finished yet, I'm revving up. And we had people like John Starr, an eminent geriatrician, and the director of the Alzheimer's Scotland's Dementia Project, to talk to us about all of the issues that were relevant to ageing across society in Scotland today. And we had a whole session, a big, heavy session on ageing and spirituality from Harriet Mowat, from Mowat Research. So we were engaging intellectually with the whole project. It was education, it was awareness raising. And we involved FEOP at every level we could. I think maybe develop that in another question, but we brought in FEOP's skills in supporting organisations about this whole spiritual care for older people, but how we as a whole church and a whole community could engage with that.
Thank you very much. Now, I know that Maureen wants to say something back, and so does Alan, or just Alan just stroking his chin? Maureen, you want to come back and just say something at the end, response?
Just very briefly. I mean, I think Ian was stressing the contribution made by older people, and I would like to draw your attention to a report by the RV, it used to be the Women's Royal Voluntary Service, it's now RVS, it's dropped the Women's, but they did a really excellent report on the contribution of older people. The contribution to GDP, which is phenomenal, the fact that a number of things wouldn't run without older people, support to grandchildren, volunteering in all sorts of aspects. So I do commend it. But I think the work that we were invited to do by the Joint Improvement Team in the Scottish Government was a survey of all churches and all faith groups in Scotland, not all of whom, I have to say, responded. But the 8% that did showed the huge volume of contribution by older people for older people. And we're conducting various conversations at the moment in different parts of Scotland to actually illustrate this much better. So I think we really have to look at the two aspects. We are not all dependent at age 60 or pension age, and that's the impression that we're given, that we are a burden and a problem, and I dispute that very strongly.
Thank you for that. One of the interesting things, wasn't it, was to try and connect how the instinctive connection between mission and old people was. Was it mission to old people? Was it mission by old people? Was it mission with old people? And all are true in different ways. We have an old folks outing in our church, we call it, and we ask for drivers to sign up. And I went and spoke to the first one, and I said, only slight problem about you driving. He said, what's that? I said, well, you are 101, and you're actually older than anyone else who were taking it. He said, but I can drive perfectly well. I said, yes, I'll just have to check the church insurance policy before we do that. But it was a good lesson to me to recognise what we're doing about in this, and that's really helpful.